Welcome to For the Purpose Of, the podcast where we navigate the intersection of technology and the world of education. I am Sarah Wood, and I'm joined by
Keith Tramper
and Ron Houtman. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about student privacy or data privacy. And the reason why we're talking about this, because all of our podcasts have a reason, is we need to really think about, in the advent of some new technologies like the chat GPTs, large language models, thinking about when you put data into them, where does it go? Who's got access to it? Same thing with thinking about our student data that we might have access to and what it means for them as students as they get older in the world that's going to be mostly consumed by digital. What's going on with who they are and what they've done in their lives and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about why kids using technology and data privacy is really important for us all and kids going forward.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Today's question to get us started out is, how have you used AI to help you with your work? And I'll start us out. I love designing things graphically. So building logos is something that I really enjoy. And there's a tool called Logo AI that's great. I can easily spend too much time building logos or building designs. And so starting with a tool like Logo AI generates a bunch of different ideas for me that I can then kind of go and make my own. So it's a really awesome tool. Done that with DALL-E as well, which is a great tool. And ChatGPT is kind of one of my go-tos when I need like help with writing or help with researching or whatever that may be. It's a good tool. So Sarah, what about you?
I also enjoy the designing thing, and I've been using a lot of the tools in Canva more intentionally. And one thing that I think is really powerful within Canva is if you set up a branding section there where you can put in like all your fonts, all your colors and everything within your brands, it just makes the AI tools that are in it a little more powerful because of how you can use your descriptors and things like that. So I love that. ChatGPT, is another good go-to. I have been using it frequently for summarizing text. Those of us in the EdTech world and often presenting different conferences or giving different professional developments, we have to often provide a description. And usually we can reuse those descriptions, but then one might be 500 characters or less. One might be 250 characters or less. And so it's great to be able to take that one description, put it in and say, rewrite this for 250 characters or less. So that's great. And I'm also a huge fan, maybe this is the design aspect, of newprofilepic.com. Quality entertainment that you can get out of that, just putting in pictures and creating AI generated images, but we use them for different things, and it's just nice, a different version of your headshot. So it's kind of fun.
I always like it because it makes me look like either Fabio or Bruce Willis.
I love it when it gives you hair.
Yeah.
I enjoy that.
That's the Fabio version. So mine, I am using any of the large language models and the GPTs. I've been trying to use lots of different ones just to see what the results are, and using the same prompt to see what the results are. And I think we all know this too, is if you put a prompt into any of these and you regenerate it, you're going to get new text every single time. So it kind of goes back to what we've talked in a prior episode about, can I detect cheating cheating by students that have used these tools? And the answer is not really. You just need to know what your kids write like before this, and then try to figure out, or else they paste in the part that says, I am a GPT model, and they'll paste it right into the document. So I use Bard, Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, and any other ones come up. And I think the thing we're going to see is that many of the GPTs are all going to be very similar to each other, because it just depends on the training data that they've used to come up with stuff. But I think the big thing that, for our podcast listeners and everybody going forward, first of all, this is new normal. So prepare yourself for this. These tools that are out there are going to be ways for you and your students to become much more efficient and effective. And I think it's going to be a really good learning tool also, depending on the kind of prompt that you put in. So one of my favorite prompts that I use when I'm putting into the systems is act as a copywriter. take the following text, and like Sarah said, I've got a 1,000 word abstract of something, and create a presentation title for this, no more than 80 characters. Things like that. Those are those things that'll really help, especially when you're trying to, you're on a deadline trying to do stuff. So some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, Ron, I agree. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of look at these to help us in different ways. And I think it's all kind of come back to that personal factor of what we want to get out of it in those prompts that we're using. And really our kids are using technology more than ever in school. And so that makes me think a lot about how much of their personal information is being collected and stored in all these different places that are out there, and how it's so important as educators. We need to make sure that their information is secure and that they understand like that they're putting their information out there even to begin with. And when they click that, sign in with Google, just click accept, allow. Are they really reading the things that they're allowing access to?
I think, Sarah, too, when you said that, there's there's a thing that's coming out a lot of us know about, but Google has turned on this thing that is going to prevent a lot of these third-party companies from collecting student data. School districts actually have to opt into this, single sign-on or OAuth 2, the ability to use Google to sign in to collect data. And you have to actually whitelist all those things or put them on an allow list to allow your districts to use those. And we've already seen a bunch of emails from people about, hey, this thing says they need new permissions for this. And the first thing that we do when we're looking at turning on an extension or the ability to log in with Google is we're looking to see what the privacy policy says, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a network admin's dream.
Yeah, well, it is an interesting thing too, is because there are so many applications that, it says it's going to access your Google Drive, but it really never tells you exactly what it's going to access in your Google Drive. So I think we've gone from, I would say, the 10 years ago Google, where we were all about turning on everything for everybody and using all the stuff, to now we're going, there's some implications here of releasing all of your data into, other organizations that you really don't know their intentions about how they might use your data. So I would say big picture, the first layer of a lot of this with thinking about student data privacy, first of all, thinking about your kids and their futures. So if you've never done this before, I advocate everybody do this, is go to your search engine of choice, if it's Google or Bing or or the Yahoo or Dogpile, I think is still, believe it or not, it's still out there.
Jeeves?
I don't know if Jeeves, I don't know, AOL is still
I will always bring up Jeeves in the conversation.
Yeah. But seriously, go out and just Google your name and you'll find all these online databases that are data scrapers that have scraped it from other databases. And, they're like the people search kind of websites. Go in there and look at the data that's on you. And then when you actually go in and wait for those things to load, but people don't know this, by the way, when you search on those sites, sometimes the reason why it says it's building profile for like 30 seconds to a minute, the way that they get paid is how long you persist looking at the advertisements on those websites. So they will charge advertisers more money the more time you spend on the website. Get it? So, but just thinking about that kind of data, intentional or non-intentional, there's all kinds of information about you on the web that you may or may not want. So think about your kids in the future. Do they want everything about them online? First name, last name. Think about all the relatives that it might track, different addresses, all that sort of stuff. It's kind of, I don't want to call it a stalker's nightmare, but I'll just say there's a ton of information out there for anybody to use, and that use might even be bad use. And that use would be, how do I hack into someone's account using openly online data like that? So just thinking about talking to our kids, how do they prevent that amount of data from going to places? Are they just sharing their stuff with everybody? So to me, that's a really big thing, I think, going forward, especially seeing every week there's a new data breach someplace. My favorite website to subscribe to is Have I Been Pwned? And that's PWNED, is that pwned? That's the hacker term for being owned. You should seriously, if you're one of our fun listeners, put your email address in there and see how many data breaches have occurred with your email address that you commonly use. You would be astounded. and you
times however many email addresses you have.
Yeah.
Right.
And same thing with, just all that information about you. You've seen data breaches of financial companies like the big Experian and all the ones that do credit reports. This is just going to be continually happening over and over and over. So trying to minimize your footprint in some way, I think it's a good thing. And it's completely contrary to the way I used to think 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it's like every time there's a new social network, I'm going to like get an account, log in, put all my random thoughts that nobody needs to know on it. Now I'm like, I will go to that place and I will register my name so nobody else can steal it. That's the way that I do it. So Keith, what do you think about when you're thinking about data privacy and security for our kiddos?
Yeah, no, the whole have I been pwned thing is just fascinating and scary sometimes to me too, getting in there and just seeing what sorts of leaks have happened with my information in it. And half the time it's with organizations that I did not even realize my personalized information was in. So it's just definitely something to go and check up on. I try to, keep up on that. And like Ron said, subscribe to it. It's a good tool. But it's important for our kids to also be aware of this. And I think there's a few ways that we go about this as educators just to kind of help them see that this is a part of life, taking care of your personal information and making sure it's not getting into places that you don't want it to get into. So I really like an activity that I call the Think Like a Hacker Challenge, where we get our students to think about if they were a hacker trying to get into their accounts, what kind of information would they need in order to get access? What kind of passwords would they guess? And would they have access to your pet's name or your birthday or other important dates to you? Can they find that through your social media and any pictures that you've posted? Thinking about all the spaces where your data might be vulnerable is a really good practice. So doing that with students oftentimes kind of reveals those spaces where they're not being careful with it and helps prevent future issues. Thinking about COPA law, where students have to be 13 years or older to use tools that might collect information about them, schools actually have some ability to bypass that or act as a parent or guardian. And I think that's something that we don't often think about as educators is what are we signing that kid up for when we ask them to make an account with a certain tool, or we, have them in tools where their data is collected. So I think that's something that we also need to be aware of as educators is, hey, we also have to be looking at privacy policies. We also have to be thinking about the terms of service and what we're agreeing to, not just for us, but for our kids as well.
That just makes me think about too, and timely, the week that we're recording this is Digital Citizenship Week, is what are we doing to build capacity in students in their own digital citizenship and recognize some of those things that are going on. Like, am I signing up for something just because my teacher told me? And so you believe like, oh, my teacher told me, so I'm going to do it. It must be safe, and not saying that teachers don't do their due diligence, but there is sometimes a lot of weeds you need to look through to find some of those privacy policies and things like that. And I think it's just important for students to understand. I mean, we're kind of moving beyond what digital citizenship was 10 years ago and have a safe password and be kind online. Still true to this day, but I think it's so much more complex than what we're asking students to be cognizant of as they're living in that online space, whether it's on their Chromebook at school, device at home, whatever that might be, on their phone, kind of things. I think there's just so much that are out there.
Yeah, and I would add one other thing when you talk about this, Sarah, about the digital citizenship side of things too, is again, future focused, right? Just think about our students and what their futures look like. As adults, we know that our credit score is pretty important to us. So you have to really think about this. Do we think that credit scores are going to disappear in the next 20 or 30 years? Nope, I don't think so. I think it's probably just going to be part of everything. Your car insurance, unfortunately, is the price that you pay is based partially on your credit score. Your ability to get a mortgage, buy a house, get an apartment, lots of financial stuff is based on that. And if your data that you've shared willingly with lots of these third-party organizations, you have no idea how they're using it, and you don't have any data privacy agreements, if these companies get sold, handed off, or breached, that's a really easy way for a bad actor to have a treasure trove of information. And the information they want the most? They want new people, and they want social security numbers from 3-year-olds, because they can build up a huge credit record. Because the thing is, your date of birth is not tied to your social security number, like most of the time, except in federal databases. But if you've got that one key information, first name, last name, and address, I would call it trivial to start setting up that sort of stuff for, that. And that's the data that folks really love to use. And we've seen this over and over again with our schools, as we are, as schools, huge targets for data. I guess exfiltration is the big word we would use, to break into a student information system or to gain access to student Google Drives or whatever, by whatever means is happening. This is the target audience, is our kids. So that's why we're really wanting you to think about this a little bit.
Yeah. And also what Keith was saying about his Think Like a Hacker activity, I just saw a video the other day, and it was just a short reel saying, raise your hand if you're the password kid for your parents. Yeah. And I'm like, then you have so many people admitting, because they might know their parents' password for one thing or another, signing in on Netflix or whatever, and that they're basically giving out their parents' information and passwords without thinking much about that, just by admitting that they are the password kid.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So just to wrap this up, we want you, our listeners, to really just kind of think about this just a little more critically, as thinking about your students really as a data treasure trove for people. And as you are selecting things that you may want to use with your students, to really just consider, do you really know what the data privacy agreement looks like for any particular application that you're using? And how do you know? So a lot of times this is involving, if you're not really great at this, would be a great time for you to involve your local education technologist or somebody in your IT department. Many times there should be a procedure in place before any of the stuff gets turned on. However, we know that doesn't happen. We have a thing in schools called shadow IT, which is the IT department does IT department stuff. And then if you need stuff that they don't need to know about or don't know about, that's your job to do. So we just want you to just really think about that, is when you are clicking stuff, or again, as Sarah and Keith have both said, is if you've got a new app you want your kids to use, have you actually looked at the data protection agreements that might be in place? Have you talked to anybody to say, what happens if this data gets exfiltrated? What access do they have to drives and things like that? So it's a really good time to think about this again, especially thinking that it is cybersecurity. Oh, what'd you say it was? Cybersecurity Awareness Week? Is that right? Or
Digital Citizenship
and Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Okay. All those things. Yeah. So it's a really good time just to kind of think about this before you just say, hey, we need a new thing. So be careful with the new thing. So with that, thanks for listening to the first part. We're going to be on to our second segment after this brief message.
New varieties of Oreos keep popping up, and I hear they've made an artificially intelligent Oreo. It's one smart cookie. No jokes about it, AI has been here for a while and will continue to grow and evolve. It is important that educators are aware of what it is, and it's so much more than just ChatGPT, and how it can be leveraged as a teaching and learning tool. Register today for EdTech Cheer 2023, which will take place in the first 2 weeks of December, where you can engage in micro-learning where the focus will be on topics surrounding the world of artificial intelligence. Claim your spot today for free at bit.ly/etc23-register and earn up to 6 sketch credits. This commercial was written by Human for Humans. Join me in embracing the world of AI. And yes, no AI bots were used in crafting this commercial.
Greetings, Podcast PDXers. We hope you're enjoying the episode. This episode's Podcast PDX question is, what steps do you take to protect your students' data privacy? What about your own? Look for the prompt to hit your inbox soon. Learn more about how you can earn sketches for listening to this podcast at bit.ly/FTPO-PDX. All right, and welcome back. Just to kind of continue on the topic of data and privacy and security, I wanted to ask a question of the group here and see what you are doing to protect your own privacy, or any tips that you might have for our educators to protect their own. So why don't we start with you, Sarah?
So I know I'll probably forget a lot of things because some things are so like embedded as part of what I do that you don't think about it as much as anymore. But one thing that I've recently spent time doing was going through on my phone and turning off a lot of notifications, background data use, and things like that. Turning it off in your search within your phone, just turning off a lot of those background things that could potentially be serving as that weigh in, I guess, to my data. And then another thing, which I don't enjoy doing, I'll just be honest, is sometimes honestly going through my spam and looking and seeing what spam I'm receiving, what is it mentioning in those email titles and things like that. Anything that might give me a clue as to how they could have gathered my data, unsubscribing from, newsletter lists and things like that. Just trying to stay on top of that. Like I have found comfort in the uncomfort and seeing all those notifications on my email on my phone, but like trying to minimize that so I don't look at it and like freak out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there used to be a really good tool called Unroll Me that would look through your emails and tell you, oh, here's all the lists you're subscribed to, which was a great idea. But then, a few years into the process, we learned that they, in fact, were taking that data and using it against us too. So yeah, another space to realize where your data is going, because it was spelled out in the terms of service for that tool. So, yeah.
Yep. Trust no one. So I would say with mine are probably a little different than everybody else, just because I am kind of, I want to call it, I nerd out on the privacy and security side of things a little bit, just because I have a really good understanding of how important this stuff is going forward in one's life. So first one is, I would tell everybody to use a password manager of some sort, because most people tend to reuse a password multiple times, which is a really bad idea, especially if it's tied to any of your, and just face it, all of our financial data is online someplace, with if it's your credit union, don't use banks, by the way, credit union, your retirement accounts that you might have, Social Security Administration, you name it. I would always use a password manager, and a password manager is basically an add-on. The built-in like Chrome password manager, I'm a little skeptical of that I am not fully convinced that is unbreachable, because I've been reading some stuff about it and just is a little scary. So I use Bitwarden as my password manager, and it works really well. I know one password. I don't know any of my other passwords anymore. I only know one master password. Everything else is filled in for me, and it's randomly passed in or pasted in, and I have no idea what they are. Another one I would suggest to everybody is to do a credit freeze with the three major credit bureaus, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Putting a credit freeze on your accounts, really, it does kind of two things I've noticed. One is you stop getting all that crap in your mailbox that you've been pre-approved for various credit cards, because that's a really good vector for people to actually do identity theft on you also, where if somebody, you just don't pick up your mail some night and overnight somebody walks past your mailbox and grabs whatever's in there, it's pretty easy to put together, if you think about it, a credit card application along with maybe you got a bank statement at the same time. You've got a treasure trove of physical data right there. So the credit freeze works really well. You do have to unfreeze your credit when you apply for new things, which is really not a problem. It takes moments to do, and it takes moments to put a freeze on, and it's free. And I think the last one is if you just do a Google search for opt-out pre-approved, just those 4 words, opt-out pre-approved, we'll put these in the show notes also, is that you can basically put yourself on a really nice unmailing list for all of these organizations that actually run credit checks on you to send you pre-approved credit cards and all these other things. I had the opportunity last week to pick up my neighbor's mail, who obviously have not done any of these steps at all. I was just appalled at the amount of mail that they're getting at their house for pre-approved credit cards. And I'm getting nothing in my mailbox anymore for that. Nothing at all. And they're getting, and I'm not even kidding, during last week, I counted these things just to see. They had 17 pre-approved credit card mailings last week alone. I'm just like, what the what? That's a lot of stuff to come in. So, Keith, what do you think?
Yeah, that is a lot. I think one of the things that happened, I guess, more recently is the whole GDPR thing that came out of
the Europe.
Thank you. Jeez, that little thing, across the pond. So I try to pay attention to those little GDPR prompts that show up. Those are the things that when you load a web page that's going to use cookies typically, or use your information in some way, it will pop up and say, hey, what are your preferences with this? So they can't just kind of scrape your information off of that as needed. So I like to take a moment every time I load a page like that and just turn off everything that is not needed. Some cookies are necessary in order to get in and around certain websites, but there's a lot of information that's pulled to send you ads and give those companies some data to help with the experiences and things like that. So definitely something to pay attention to. I sometimes like to use just a dummy account, which is like a Gmail that is loosely tied to me. It has very little actual information. Generally, it's my initials, not even my full name, where I put stuff in there, and use those accounts in any place where, there's a company linked to it that may take your data and sell it somewhere, or doesn't feel like a safe place to be, because, we all know that there's a number of companies across the internet that have been hacked or leaked, and all that information's out there. So sometimes it's just best to use a dummy account when, like Ron was saying earlier, you're signing up for all these different social media platforms, or using all these different tools that are out there, especially in our line of work where we're sampling a lot of ed tech tools. Having that dummy account can go a long ways. So I think those are my big things. So I think I'm hearing general practices for us are using password managers, paying attention to the things that we're signing up for, and I guess just being aware of where our information is going in different aspects of our lives.
So as you just consider going forward in your adult life and how you're going to help our kids make good decisions for them, because, we're really good at helping our kids, just think about those things we talked about. Again, big picture, password managers, credit freezes, making sure your kids understand that. I think those are or understand privacy policies. Those are some really good things for both you and your students to really understand as you think about the future of your data, and especially as we see new technologies come out that's really going to kind of grab onto that stuff like artificial intelligence. That's going to be a whole new chapter in the next few years about how your data is going to be used. So, and that's all we have for this episode of For the Purpose Of. We really appreciate you tuning in. If you like this podcast, we'd love to have you share it with other people. Give us 5 stars, 4 stars, however many stars that you think we want. We want 5, right?
All the stars.
I would like 8.
Or 8 stars. Yeah. If you like advice, we'd love to have you share it with a friend, so please do so.
Yeah, we would love to hear how you're using AI in your own work, and we would love to also hear how you're protecting your own data and security. So reach out to us at edtech@kentisd.org, or check in with us at bit.ly/IamEdTech. We'll catch you next time on For the Purpose Of.
This podcast is a service of Kent ISD, produced by Ron Houtman, Sarah Wood, and Keith Tramper, and edited by Keith Tramper. Our theme music is Neon Nights by Scott Holmes Music, and our ad music is BNF by Blue Dot Sessions.
I don't know. Do you remember when you were talking to your, significant other crush or whatever it was in school, and you had to take the phone and go hide in a closet?
Yep.
Absolutely. Stretch that cord as far as you can go.
Mom, get off the internet.
Oh, I remember that one too. Yeah. It's like, I'm trying to talk to people on the internet. Isn't that from Napoleon Dynamite?